All right. Well, good morning, friends and visitors. Everyone is welcome and family here. I am very thrilled and excited to welcome you to another Sunday gathering with the Althea Center. We do have some announcements to get to and our opening meditation and prayer, but I do want to say a quick welcome to the Reverend Dr. Stuart Lord, someone who I'm very proud to call a friend. And I'm going to say this now because there's less people like as they get in over the next 10 minutes than it populates. The thing that I'm really excited about today, Stuart, you might just hang up, but you know, Stuart is a very accomplished person. Stuart is very intense and he's a powerful leader. He brings out the best in people. And I really believe that Stuart is the kind of person that holds people to their highest good and their highest ability. But in that way, he's the kind of guy that isn't afraid to put people on the hot seat. Am I right, Stuart?
Yes. Okay.
It's my turn. It's my turn.
All right, sir.
It might get warm, but I know you are bold and brave and ready for whatever comes.
Okay.
All right. On that note, let's get to our announcements. So some of you know that Tim Wilson, the director of our Mariposa program, came up with an insurance donation match challenge. Now, this is not because we're in a crisis, but it is because every January we face a massive $20,000 insurance bill that starts our year off on a bit of an unstable footing. So Tim wanted to beat that expense, help us manage it early on. He has offered to match community donations, and we have reached the $2,000 mark. He's going to match that, and we're looking for another $2,000, and he's going to match that, and we're just going to see how far we can go to load that up and get ahead of the curve for 2021. Now, Althea, Be My Valentine, the community creativity gathering, has been running for 2 weeks now. Great reviews, people love it. And it continues this Sunday. There's 2 more, I believe, and you're welcome to join anytime. It's happening on Zoom at 2:30 p.m. That's Nancy Ruff, Liz Picard, Courtney Leduc, and a 4-week exploration into creativity and community as a spiritual practice. So check out the details online. It's fantastic. And probably Susan is posting the details here. Community Connections continues and will continue indefinitely, 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time this week. The great, the wonderful, the magnanimous Kathy Humphreys will be hosting that. It's free. Of course, we love your donations, but the link is available on the website in the newsletter. So stay tuned. It's if you haven't been before, it's a wonderful time to feel connected to the community that you are a part of. And it's a way that we learn from each other and we process what we're going through in life. And usually there are themes that we share and explore. And one day we'll be doing this in person again. Suzanne Hunt has her 2 healing meditation modules coming up. Healing Meditation 1, Energy Awareness, begins this Wednesday, March 3rd. And Healing Meditation 2, Intuitive Awareness, begins March 20th. A great class to learn intuitive tools. Now, let me share a few things about her class. It is taught through instruction, guided meditation, and sharing in small groups. This particular program, the one that starts on March 3rd, will look at how our thoughts and intentions shape our life experiences. So we'll go back, or she'll take you back to look at memories, thoughts, and patterns that are carried in the energy body, and understand how those shape what we experience and believe. It is about meditation, but not meditation in the sense of stillness and silence, but more about the power of the meditative mind for inner awareness, self-understanding, and healing. There are all kinds of incredible tools, and you have to know that the feedback we've received has been absolutely wonderful. So I want to get to this conversation. I'm sorry, I'm impatient here. But There will be more Sundays with Dr. J coming up. I'll be doing all the Sundays this March. And please stay tuned, because one of these Sundays we will be doing a special transition ritual in person in a park, probably Cheeseman Park, near the Althea Center. So stay tuned for the details. We will be using social distance and masks. It's something that's going to be beautiful and powerful, but also safe and respectful for everyone who wants to be involved in a time to be together physically for the transition that we are all going through together. On that note, let's take a breath. Let's get settled in. Let's remember who we are and why we're here. So if you will, I'm going to suggest that you close your eyes, that you sit comfortably but alert, and then draw 2 big breaths in. That's right, 2 breaths at the same time. 1, 2, and then a release. And again, 2 breaths and a release. And one last time, really filling up on the inhale. Hold it a moment, notice tension or tightness, and then breathing it out, letting go of the busyness of your life, of your mind, and coming to a slower, quieter place. I invite you to draw your breath down into your belly and release long and slowly. Until you feel that expanding awareness of stillness and silence. Feel that growing sense of quiet as the presence that is our source, that is sacred, that unites and holds us all in this stillness, in this silence, with eyes closed and hearts open. We feel and remember the truth that we are together, that we are always together wherever we are. Whenever we hear this, we are part of the one family of life. From this quiet place, we affirm the blessing, the affirmation that has been passed in our community from generation to generation for over 130 years. And if you remember, you can say it out loud or just hold the words in your heart. God is all, both invisible and visible. One presence, one mind, one power is all. This one that is all is perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. We are individualized expressions of God and are ever one with this perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. From this center, we pray together, each in our own way, but together as one, to the one that is all, our source, spirit, dear God, creator. We are in gratitude for this day. We are grateful for another moment of life, to love, to learn, to let go. Today we come forward willingly with open hearts and open minds to learn how to be better members of this family of life. May we learn to love all and serve all. May we seek the stories of one another, that we might not only be better friends and allies to those who seek peace and wholeness in the world, but that we might know our own selves better, deeper, and as a full expression of spirit. Today we honor the dialogue of history, race, culture, spirit, and we bless and lift all those who have struggled, who continue to struggle under the intentional oppression of spirit, humanity, life. We stand together today. We pray together today. And we ask that we heal together today. For all these things and the prayers that remain unspoken in our hearts, we lift them and say Amen. So, welcome, welcome, one and all. Most of you have had time to read about the illustrious credentials, background, accomplishments of our guest, Dr. Stuart Lord. And you know, I am really eager to just dive in to at least what I think we're going to talk about, although I'm never really sure. Stuart, I want to welcome you, and I don't know if there's anything you want to say or ask as we get going. Oh, I think you might be muted.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here
Yeah,
and looking forward to our conversation.
that's what you think.
I'm looking forward to it, man. Whatever you bring it.
All right. So what people should know is that we are friends, and I want to qualify that because I have a tremendous amount of respect for Stuart, Dr. Lord, and actually, it is precisely because of this level of respect that I feel that I have kind of saved a very special conversation. Now, I'm just going to dive in. Black History Month. Okay, we're at the end of this. And it comes at a very unique time in American history, right? Because what some people thought, mostly white people, I would assume, about a year or 2 years ago, let's at least say 4 years ago, is that things were moving along pretty well in this country in terms of marginalized populations, people of color, racial differences, gender differences. And then something interesting happened. Now, I'm not going to get too far into the politics, but we ended up with a president who helped reveal something really important, which was that for a lot of us who felt good about where the country was in the evolving story of race, I think that millions of people discovered that we weren't even nearly as close to where we thought we were as perhaps we'd hoped. And of course, in the last year, the tension around race, which was ignited with what I sort of call the George Floyd movement, right? Although it wasn't just about George Floyd, clearly, from Breonna Taylor to George Floyd and beyond, the Black Lives Matter movement really shone and took center stage for a while. But let's face it, there is a huge road ahead. And to be blunt, I think a lot of mainstream identified or white supremacy identified populations don't even really begin to understand the road ahead. And when I say white supremacy in this case, I don't mean the extremists. I just mean all the white folks and frankly non-white folks that just adhere to certain values and ideals that ultimately are associated with a white story. So what's my point? My point is a month like Black History Month then becomes contentious in this context. Some would say we shouldn't have a Black History Month because it feels like tokenism. It's just a friggin' month out of a year. This should be something that's important to us every single day. How could we diminish this to a month? Other people would say the opposite. No, no, no. We need a month to bring more energy to it, to bring more attention to it. And some would say, we don't need any of this because everyone's got a story. Everyone's history matters. Can you comment a little bit about how you see the value or importance or something else when it comes to Black History Month?
So I think when it comes to Black History Month, when people say we shouldn't do it because, you know, we should celebrate everyone's history, I think we have to start with the origin of history.
Right.
And when the people feel excluded, whether women feel excluded or GLBTQ people feel excluded. So when people feel excluded from the American story or from the human story, then people want and need their voices to be heard. So those who argue we shouldn't do it, then what are they doing in April, in June, July, and the rest of the part of the year to go to their schools and say, we demand a comprehensive history.
Right.
So they become agents of change. So there's an awareness, which starts with awareness, that we shouldn't do something. So what's the why? So the answer is, why do we do it? And the answer is, how do we write an inclusive history? Because there's some people who graduate from our schools, who go on to college, and who've never studied the history about the whole history.
Right.
They've studied European history, but when it comes to other movements, you know, the chapters are very thin, or they just mention it and pass on. So I think until we should take that energy and infuse ourselves to be agents of inclusive history. And then maybe 20 years from now, 30 years from now, if people did that, we wouldn't need a Black History Month, or Black History Month is celebrated with other months. There's a Women's Month. So why do we have all these months? We have them because we haven't figured out how to realize that all of us are brothers. If you are my brother and you are my sister, and we should tell the story about our family.
Mm-hmm.
Our family, the human family, is inclusive. So let's tell the family story. And then if we get there, we'll see what happens.
So absolutely clear and well said. But it's interesting coming from you when you talk about history. I can't help but think about education. You talked about the education of youth. You know, comes to mind, I haven't been in school for so long, meaning grade school. What I know is that, of course, the old cliche is that the so-called conquerors, the colonizer, writes the history. It would be interesting to know if there are history books today in which chapters dedicated to different experiences are written by the people who experienced it or represent it. I don't know if that exists, but maybe you and I need to work on that project. But to move on, you know, you have been very involved in higher education, turning around institutions, working as a dean, and so on. Mainstream institutions, you were involved at Duke. I don't know if you called alternative institutions, but like Naropa, even with the Fox Institute, which is an educational institute. And many people in the Althea community knew the work of Matthew Fox, and he actually joined us for an event in December. How would you characterize the role of education? And you could take it anywhere you want along the progression from elementary school to graduate school. I mean, could you expand on what you think is the task at hand, because some would say that this problem isn't just about history, but that there is a kind of white consciousness, white ideal, white culture that's embedded in all the training facilities and programs, that the way physicians are trained and the way veterinarians are trained and the way nurses are trained and engineers and so on, that there is a cultural bias throughout the education system. Is that true, or are some things really not culturally biased, like engineering,
Well,
geometry?
so when you ask the question, my mind goes to, how do people feel when a person walks in the room who is an engineer from Africa or from Arabia or from a foreign country, let's say Guatemala or Nicaragua, or El Salvador, and they speak a little different dialect. So their English is not, the King's English. People react differently.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a sense of bias there. So our whole educational system is predicated on, you have to be a certain way, you have to act a certain way, you have to speak a certain way, you have to conform. And if you conform, you get a ticket to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So those who go to the best schools in the country, to whom much is given, much is expected. So how do you take that great education and now you're held accountable to do something with it, to make a difference in the world, to serve the world, to help people who may not, or create greater access to education? And our problem today is we don't have enough access. A lot of people don't have the choice to get an education because they fundamentally can't afford it. And so how do we make education affordable? How do we look at who's teaching in the classroom? We talk about like the disparities that, there's not enough people of color or being able to teach some of our courses or being able to be hired. We're not growing people at every level to aspire to education. People don't see their stories when we're teaching about education. So people don't see education as accessible. And so I think educational systems have to really take a hard look at themselves and ask themselves, if we want an inclusive world, we want an inclusive workplace, how does that begin at every decision we make in this institution? What does it mean to have a lens that is infused, built upon diversity, equity, and inclusion? Every decision I make, every policy I make comes out of that. Who's not at the table? What voices are missing? So if I have a cabinet in my institution, because it all starts with leadership, if I have a cabinet and everyone in my cabinet looks like me, I have a problem. And I should go to bed knowing I have a problem. And I should wake up in the morning starting to work toward that problem. But it starts with me as a human being. How do I enhance my awareness about my problem? How do I build relationships with others? And how do I make a commitment to do something about my problem? How do I act upon it? So what our institutions are doing, they hire what they call a diversity chief executive, vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now that's a good thing. So I'm not complaining about that. But that's the only person in the cabinet that doesn't look like them. That's a problem. That means you can't find someone in finance. You can't find someone in facilities. You can't find a dean or a director of a school who's a person that is not from the majority. That's a problem. So the people exist, but that's where it starts. Full inclusion. And that becomes your mantra, and people begin to see that as that's your practice, because diversity and equity is a practice. It's a practice that we do every day. We expand our awareness. We build relations with others who are different. We learn about other cultures. We make a commitment to bring about change, and then we become active agents of change. But it's an individual process individually, toward the team, and toward the whole organization. And our institution of higher education, some great places, but they don't measure the mark of being inclusive campuses. You can ask any person on our campus who's a person of color, and they will tell you their story of how they have been marginalized and how they feel less included. And it's just not people of color, it's gender, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, well said. You know, it reminds me, if people don't relate to what you're talking about, this might, I want to give a warning. I'm going to say a bunch of potentially upsetting things for people, but there's a documentary with Matt Damon about water. It's on Netflix. Unfortunately, I can't remember what it's called, but if people look it up, it's an interesting self-study that I recommend to explore what you're talking about, because what they did was they looked at projects around the world and they really had scientists from very diverse backgrounds. And I want to say that I can be honest enough that when some of the scientists spoke from non-white North American, white European countries, my first impulse was to double check, like, who was this person, and were they really, was this someone from the community that came up with an idea, or was this, and I just want to say it was an unconscious reflex, and I grew up in communities of color. It's not like, right? So this is an internalized issue. Now, I want to expand on that with a couple more examples, and then I'll come back to a question. So I spent a lot of time working with Indigenous people, and you probably know I wrote this book called Working with Indigenous Elders, and we were looking at, meaning like healers and teachers, we were looking at barriers to care for Indigenous people in Western hospitals, and I mean Canada and the United States. And one of the things that was so, simple to recognize but complex to communicate were how different the values were around healing and what a healer is. The Western healers enter a room with a conscious claiming of confidence even when they didn't have it, and that was considered something to celebrate. The Indigenous healers come in, and their demonstration of credibility is by showing humility, that they don't come in loud, they don't come in fast, they don't come in with answers. One comes in with answers, one comes in with questions, one makes eye contact as a sign of authority, one doesn't make eye contact as a sign of respect, and so on and so forth. One of the complications that emerged in Canada as the government started to become more conscious about this work that you're talking about, and again, I'm going to acknowledge that what I'm going to say will sound offensive for some people, but I want to state it as an observation for your commentary. One of the things that started to emerge as the Canadian government made direct efforts for reparations and reconciliation and bringing huge amounts of money to Indigenous communities was that many of those communities were, quote, not really ready to receive that level of funding and authority. Now, what does that mean? Well, some people would say that in itself is a racist statement. You give them the money, you give them the opportunity, you give them the authority, and let them run with it. It's their experiment now, not yours. And others would say, this came from the Indigenous community, whoa, don't just suddenly think you can flip a switch and pass a level of leadership, authority, and responsibility into groups that may still be healing from what was done to them. There needs to be a more collaborative, right, process of mutual support. But then you're seeding their change with white leadership again. So what do you say when this topic comes up around removing barriers, providing opportunities, giving money to inner city communities, regardless of color. And this kind of notion that they may not be ready, which is both, I think, implicitly racist, but might also be partly true.
So you used the phrase giving money to people or communities that are in need. That's what I sort of distilled that little phrase that jumped out at me. So I think the problem is giving something to someone.
Hmm.
And I just thought about this. This is a fresh thought. Because you're not building a partnership. If I give the community money, I'm not transforming myself.
Mm.
So the society can't change. We have to be in community and in partnership with each other for real change to happen. I can give all the money in the world. You know, we can write the check. But then we have divided, we still have divisions in our society. We're not closer to a beloved community. We're not closer to me learning something about the people who are in great need and find out why are they in great need. What are the systems that happen, or what are the structures? What are the policies? So if I'm learning in partnership with a community, then everyone benefits. But if I just give something, thinking I'm going to feel better, we haven't changed. You know, and there's a little practice that I do often. I started doing it 30 years ago. When I go to the airport, I look around and I say to myself, everyone in this airport is my brother and my sister. And how you treat your brother and your sister. And you want to learn about your brother and your sister. You want to learn about their culture. You want to learn about their situation. And you want to commit yourself to world global peace. And so if we see each other as connected individuals, we don't give anything to anyone. We share our resources to make our lives, all of us, better. Because if one of us are oppressed, all of us are oppressed.
Yeah.
If one of us are down, all of us are down. If you hurt, I hurt. And that's the kind of beauty we have when we talk about the human family. And what affects one of us affects all of us. I learned that when I was little. And I can't get away from that lesson. It stuck with me. And I don't want to get away with that lesson. I want to teach that to my daughter. I want every young person in the world to grow up thinking that, knowing that, feeling that, and have examples every day to see that alive.
So I want to jump in because this is very powerful and amazingly, although I'm not surprised, but it is incredible. From the time I started doing interviews, which was early September, we've been doing just really inviting people that I consider very special people, not sort of just anybody. The one thread that always shows up, the one thread is that the future of humanity rests on our ability to see ourselves in each other. But you kind of represent the icing on the cake or the summit of the mountain, because it's one thing to say it spiritually. It's another thing to really integrate it into policy, relationships, leadership, education, life, and so on. Now, this isn't probably politically correct, but I consider you a very evolved person. When I say politically correct, you're not supposed to spiritually rate people, right? Like some people are slower and some people are ahead. But let's just say I know you're someone who's done a lot of personal work. You're someone who's kept your eyes and heart open in your life. So I do see you as just a very mature human. Now, having said that, what's powerful about the vision you shared is it recognizes that success for any one community requires the interrelationship of all. But how do we, whoever we is, manage relationships with those communities that are still deep enough in the pain of historical experience that they actually would listen to what you're saying and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, no, Stuart, I don't want them to change for me, with me. I want that check, and you leave us alone. You've meddled with us enough. And that could be Latino or feminist, or, it doesn't matter what the community is. How do you respond to that? And you know that's out there.
Well, it's two sides to every coin. For every person that says no to me, there's going to be another one that says yes. And you treat them the same. You treat them with care and love and compassion, because those who say yes, they're ready. And it's a difficult journey when we really explore our differences and we're open and we're vulnerable. And those who say no, there's a reason they're saying no. Lack of trust, there's fear, and they have every reason to say no and to be angry and mad that someone would want to work with them. So that's an invitation when you hear no, is to do some interpersonal work and do some work in your families and do some work in the people you know who aren't ready yet. So you don't have to go across the street, but you can stay in your zip code and work on and help the people that you interact with every day to become more holistic in how they operate in relationship to others. And there's a lot of people of color who spend a lot of time working toward ending racism. But I would like to invite, I always said to my best friend, Carter Vaya, I said, Carter, when we were in seminary, racism is a human problem.
Right.
White people need to hear white people say that.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you start saying and other people start saying who are non-people of color, then no one can escape it. But when I say it, sometimes people get turned off. They don't want to hear it anymore. They heard enough, and here comes Stuart. Here comes another plea for a balanced, inclusive society. But when people see that the person who's saying this that is not a person of color,
right,
they open another door for people, because then people can't escape that, can't escape the reality, tell the story. So we all have work to do, and it depends our willingness to start, and we have to start. And we have started. We have lots of examples. Your work that you're doing, we've started. But many more people are welcomed at the table.
Yeah. There's so many things I want to ask you about. But before I get to the two of the big ones that I hope we'll have time to fit in, kind of interested just to kind of open the door for some more personal reflection from you, because one of the things, I don't really know, I'm not really sure how this is going to come out, but I'm going to take it anyway. So one of the things that, let's just say, white folks sometimes react to is the presumption that they're racist, right? Just because they're not doing something about racism. And it's interesting in general how human beings can feel indignant or hurt when they are assumed to be something they're not, right? There's a lot of that white righteousness. But I'm curious about your experience, if I can just ask you directly. I mean, you're big in stature, you're a strong man. That's obvious when someone meets you. You have a clean shaven head. It's obvious, you have darker skin. You have been in all kinds of positions of leadership. You have more education than the average person on the planet. And yet, I wonder, I know lots of people of color that have navigated life and frankly never experienced too much racism just because of where they were, or they were lucky, or opportunity. But I also know people who who exemplify where humanity must go and still find themselves treated at face value. I don't know how far back in your story you want to go, but what has it been like to be a man of education, accomplishment, military service, I believe?
No, no military service.
Oh, for some reason I thought you were involved with the military. Education, accomplishment, leadership in academic institutions, leadership in the business world, leadership in the church world. And yet, when you hit the street, to some people, you're just a black guy. Do you have a perspective for people who can't relate that you could share?
So,
Is that, do you know what I'm asking you? Is that
yeah.
too?
So, I mean, I'm the wounded healer in the sense that I've been wounded by racism, which a lots of my life. If I say a percentage of my life, the number comes 25%. I've experienced racism. And, I grew up in an inclusive community, but I've had my teachers tell me I couldn't take this course because they didn't think I was intelligent enough because I was black. I've had interactions with the Ku Klux Klan.
Wow.
I've had painted on my wall in my house the KKK. The campus security drove by my house and saw the door open one night, and they were scared to come in because they thought that, someone had killed me because of, at that time, I was doing some civil rights stuff. So there's not been a job that I've had professionally that I haven't experienced some sense of run into racism or been treated because of color of my skin. And so what do you do in our society? You get as much education as you can get so you can have a seat at the table. Because if you don't have the education, you don't get a seat at the table. You don't get to make decisions. And people make decisions about who you are, and they make policies about you, for you, to marginalize you because of the color of your skin. And so, but that is not the end of the story for me. That is the inspiration to keep fighting on because, I committed at 3 years old. In third grade to end racism. And the tragedy for me about the living human experience is I will die, and that has not been accomplished. And so you asked a question. I'm sorry if I answered or didn't answer it, but I did the best.
No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful and painful and honest and full of love as well. And what I hope when people hear, you speak about this is I guess the significance of being anti-racist, because it's really no longer, I think, acceptable to say, oh, I didn't even think about whether Stuart was black or not. Doesn't matter to me. And what I learned some years ago is like people who say, I don't see color. It's actually a horrible offense for someone who lives in a world that treats them as if color matters.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so in a weird way, I'm going to use this to transition to another topic that I really wanted to ask you about that's also pretty provocative. And it has to do with spirituality. So one thing that I so admire about you that I know is a part of what makes you such a great human, such a great leader, is your deep sense of spirituality. And though I know you've been a leader in the Methodist Church and you are ordained, I also know you're very inclusive and very eclectic and honor really all teachings that are uplifting life and humanity. But sometimes I wonder, when you look at the spiritual movements in, let's say, the United States, the yoga movement, the interfaith movement, the self-help movement. Some say these movements also need to undergo a deep revisioning to see history of experience, gender, race, and so on. And others say, whoa, these movements are specifically about something that transcends culture. So all people experience oneness the same. All people experience the silence of meditation the same. All people experience Zen the same, Taoism the same, because they come from a place beyond human culture, language, race. But I think it's kind of an old habit of culture to assume that there's such a thing as universal experiences. And I'm curious, from your spiritual work and studies and being involved with different teachers and leaders that have a great focus on inclusivity, is the inclusive, mystical, spiritual movement of the day also touched by racism? And if so, how does the Black experience of spirituality find a voice? I don't know. Did that make sense as a question? Like this idea that, everyone can, everyone sitting down to do yoga basically has the same experience. Everyone sitting down to do silent meditation has the same experience. I don't know. That's a presumption, but it's generally a presumption made by white people who predominantly serve white people. I don't know if it's true.
Well, I mean, people bring to their spirituality or their practice their experiences. And so when people come to the Black experience of the Black church, out of that history of the Black experience and the struggle, there is a different expression how that spirituality is even expressed in the world. And the civil rights movement was a spiritual movement. Mm-hmm. It was grounded in the story of Moses and grounded in the story of Jesus and liberation theology. And so when people come who are from diverse perspectives, different cultures, they come to meditation, they can't shut who they are out or turn off their culture or turn off their experience. And so they bring that experience to the meditative experience. So whether the meditation experience is adaptable and opens itself up to be inclusive in accepting people's different rhythms. We all have a rhythm, and we like our rhythms, but how do we create a new rhythm that is much more open and inclusive and changing and evolving? And that is where I think, people, they bring who they are to every situation. And so if there's racism in the world, there's racism in the neighborhood, racism in families, then it shows up in our spiritual practices, or shows up who we are. And so maybe we have to be comfortable with just, if it means going somewhere where it's quiet, sitting at a river, and saying to yourself, and me, myself too, saying, I am a racist. I am a racist. And not apologizing for it at first, and not doing anything, but just sort of, you did the meditation when you opened. And what happens when you say is, welcome that, or breathe into that. I am a racist. How can you not be a racist growing up in our society? If you were awake in the world, how can you not be? I don't know. But what would that do if people had permission?
Yeah.
Without judgment, just to sort of breathe and say, I am, or, like, I am a male, or I am, whatever, something as that, those words, and see what it does to our bodies, and see what it does to us, and see what it brings up to us. Or for a man to say, I am a woman, and to be able to walk into the woman's experience, because we can't experience it, no, but to be able to say from a woman, how have we as society marginalized women, and women are still being paid less than men? And that fundamentally is crazy.
Mhm.
And how can any leader in our society, government, not realize that is a fundamental problem?
Mhm.
And people don't have access to health care, education. Those are problems. But maybe we have to agree, maybe we have to say it ourselves, and maybe begin to experience the other without running away from it,
Yeah.
but run toward it.
Yeah. Beautiful. And what I, where your comments take me is kind of to the other side of that moment by the river. And for me, I want to share what I feel are two of the great gifts of spirituality or spiritual practice, and see if this resonates with you. It's finding your center, but sort of between heaven and earth. And what I mean by that is a part of you awakens to the realization that there is an aspect of your consciousness, of yourself, your identity, that can never be touched by racism, by poverty, by violence. There's something in each of us that transcends the history of life. And the value of connecting with that is that we gain freedom and courage and choice. But it's not only incomplete, but it's dangerous if it's not partnered with the integrated experience that says, and while that is true, I am also racist and sexist, and
Yes.
I am also women and men and transgender, and I am also the earth. Um, do you and in that way bring the quote high consciousness into the everyday experience without further marginalizing people by spiritually bypassing our differences? Did
Yeah.
that resonate for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. It resonates because there's something fundamentally that's so human about who we are, grounded in our spirituality, that for me to be able to lean in to say I am something doesn't make me something, but welcomes real transformation. I did a sermon years ago. I think it was in 86. No, 88. And the title was God Has AIDS. And
Yeah,
people freaked out.
yeah,
How could I, say that and put a
yeah,
sermon around it? Because it was how we were treating people.
right.
And what happened in 1987 and 88, and what happened when the AIDS movement, and how silence was killing people. And so God didn't have to have AIDS, but to sort of think about, if God had AIDS, how would we treat God? How would we welcome God and see our brothers and sisters part of the human race?
Yeah. They, there's so much. I feel like we're just getting started, and we've
I know.
got,
I'm sorry, man.
oh my gosh, this is so great. Um, I'm gonna try to squeeze something in here. I'm really going for all the juicy ones. So, and this is a weird one. But I feel like there's something really instructive in this question, although I can only feel it, I don't know it. The question has to do with um, the Black American experience and patriotism. It's a curious thing. As at least in terms of communities of color, my deepest experiences with Indigenous people, Native people, spent, well, most of my life very, very closely involved. And one thing that's always been powerful and very difficult to talk about or explain is that I can go to an event that's about healing, like Native people running Native events for Native people. I'm there. It's about healing from residential schools, political oppression, conscious genocide. And it starts by honoring the American flag. It starts by honoring the American government. It starts by honoring the veterans. And there's tons of veterans. There is a disproportionate number of Black and Native American veterans that fought to protect the country that oppressed them. What the hell? And yet, there's something really important for all people to understand what that level of dignity is about. And I wonder if you can just comment on any aspect of this phenomena. Why a Black man or woman would even want to be the president of this country and not just say, you know, I'm taking this somewhere else.
So I think we want the full experience.
Hmm.
We don't want a half American experience. Even though you may be treated to where you're not included, but that doesn't mean I don't grow up wanting the full American experience and especially I want it for my children and the next generation. So I may not have had it, but when you were called, the N-word, and you were called Negro, and you were called, the N-word, and I got to say it because you were called nigger, and then the Black people had to realize they had to take some of that back. I am a man. Black is beautiful. Black lives matter. I am somebody. All those are foundational messages that says you may be beaten down and you may not have the American experience, but you deserve it. Why do you deserve it? Because you are created and you are a child of God. And through it all, no matter how many times you're knocked down, locked out, prevented from access, God never told you that. No, nowhere God told us that. The Constitution may have told us that we're less, but when God created us all equal, well, we brought the message. We live that message every day. And in that message, the message of hope. And you can't kill hope. You can't destroy hope.
Yeah, it's powerful. And you know what it reminds me, Stuart, is I don't know if you've heard of constellation therapy, but there's a lot of, there's a fundamental concept in a lot of psychological disciplines that basically says a child wants to make peace with its place in the family. And it doesn't matter if the parents were abusive. It doesn't matter if the parents were absent. As long as we live, we want to make peace with our place in that family. And we wonder, why do kids keep going back to that home? Or why does she keep going back to that partner, or whatever it is? And I believe, you're talking about something that's very related. At a deep core level, we all know that we belong, but we want to feel that we belong. We want to heal that dissonance between our spiritual truth and what's happening around us. Isn't that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's 11:30. I can't thank you enough. I love you and I'm grateful for you. I respect you, work you do in the world. So I guess we have to wrap up. I guess that's it. Is there anything you want to say before we have a little prayer and head out?
I just hope that people who are hearing this can commit to creating a practice, their own practice, and how they begin to unite their vision of a more inclusive society and commit to doing that through awareness, enhancing relationships, and making a commitment to do something. And if you're doing it, then email me and tell me your story, and let's do this work together. And so thank you for the work you're doing, Jonathan, the work you have done, and the work that Althea is doing, and the people who are listening, that every step toward justice is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
On that note, I'm going to invite people just close their eyes for a moment. Take a breath and release the busyness of your mind and just notice what's going on in your body. Notice what's going on in your heart. And from this place of quiet, from this place of connection, we pray, each in our own way, together as one, to the one that is all, dear God, our source, our creator, to the eternal love and wisdom. May we be courageous to open our hearts and minds to the fullest experience of this human journey. May we learn to love all without exception. May we commit to serve all without exception. May we find our soul's fulfillment through this journey. And may we bring our uniqueness, our gifts, to whatever we are called to serve. And through this, may we feel our magnificence, our miraculousness, and our humility, our vulnerability, our brokenness. May we together be a part of the great healing, the wholeness, the awakening that each and every living being longs for. And may this process be guided not only through the blessing and healing of our leaders and teachers and families, but may we be guided purely by Spirit and move from love to love, growth to growth, strength to strength, blessings for all, always. Amen. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'll catch up with you soon.
Okay, brother. Thank you. All right.
All right.